Hello, everyone, and welcome to our session at Canvas 24, How Miro Innovates, a look behind the scenes. My name is Jennifer Clark. I'm a global team lead and facilitator here on the customer education team representing the Miro Academy. I'm joined by Katz. He's our Ways of Working lead, and we will be going through together our Miro Ways of Working process, some things we've learned along the way when we got curious about how Miro is working and what could we do to improve to set up the right conditions for innovation. We'll also be taking you through some fun exercises as well towards the end of our prepared content. But let me go ahead over to Miro and show you what we have in store. We'll talk a little bit, and Dom will really expand on this topic about how innovation is crucial, but it can be hard. We'll also talk about how Miro is not immune to these challenges. We really have a lot of shared experiences and understanding with you all about how innovation can be really difficult to prepare for, not just with the right tools or the right ideas, but also the right people and the right processes in place. We'll talk a little bit more about how we're navigating the mess of creating the right conditions for innovation. We'll talk a bit about some of the key practices that certain teams have installed and is kind of spreading around Miro and what we're doing to formalize those processes. And then we'll talk about how you can follow along and join us for more conversation about improving our ways of working and how it can impact innovation and speeding up that time from discovery to delivery. With that, I'd love to hand it over to Dom to talk to you a bit more about what's happening with innovation right now.
Hi everyone, I'm Dom and I lead our ways of working at Miro. That means I care a lot about how we deliver cross-functional work more effectively as we move through discover, define, and deliver. It's the discovery of a real need, the pursuit of finding a solution that actually works, and how we deliver it to our users. The more often and faster we can go through this loop, the more we can learn and adapt, and the better we'll be set up for the future. That is, of course, easier said than done. I know that because we face the same challenges with it than any other organization as well. And that's why at Miro, we have both a Miro wins and a Miro fails night to make sure we celebrate and we learn from our teams. Here's a recent example of a story that was shared at a company all hands recently. Our marketing team realized they had a problem on their hands when more than 20 people showed up to the daily stand-up. The scenes resembled more a New York Stock Exchange haggling than an effective conversation to get things done. The lead up to our Intelligent Canvas launch back in July had many of the good practices the team worked hard to implement before, like sprint planning, retros, async updates, clear accountabilities, everything you can wish for. And yet, the closer the launch date came, the more opinions were flying around, and it got increasingly difficult and slow to approve budgets and timings for launch events, getting sign-off from our leadership teams, and keeping everyone aligned on all the moving pieces. The team was able to work through it miraculously, but let's just say there was a lot to learn for everyone involved. Because we knew that we had another such launch on our hands a few months later, and here we are. Now, it's easy to get caught up in the messiness and lose momentum. And that brilliant idea of yours just runs through your fingers like quicksand. That's why innovation at speed is so critical, to keep that momentum. But it's hard. So hard, in fact, that we believe there's a better way. There just has to be. And because we're an incredibly stubborn, passionate, and curious bunch, we're determined to solve these problems for ourselves and share what we learn along the way. So we get to work. What do our customers experience? What does the research say? And what can we learn from the Mironeers who have already figured some of this out? So we interviewed more than 20 executives in depth and surveyed about 3,000 information workers and decision makers across different countries and industries. We also took a deep look inside and sifted through engagement surveys and dedicated retros to key parts of our planning and delivery processes. There are three key themes that emerged. Number one is priority. So companies are not ready for innovation. It's a priority for 85% of companies, and that's more than in any previous year. But teams feel stuck, and the leadership commitment rarely moves beyond the high-level strategy slide. Similarly, it's hard for companies to translate their values into behaviors. Collaboration and customer centricity are considered a value, but are not reflected in teams' behaviors for 55% or 32% of information workers, respectively. And lastly, too rigid ways of working are slowing things down. Surprise, surprise. While velocity is important for 91% of participants, only 1 in 3 people agree that current practices and processes actually encourage speed, often getting stuck right at the start in discovery. 1 in 3. The inability to move beyond aspiration and make the critical decisions internally to break that inertia is preventing teams to build the next big thing. So what do we do with that information? There are 4 key questions that successful, innovative teams are able to answer consistently. Why are we doing this? What problems are we solving? How do we move avoidable friction and get things done? And how do we collaborate with, who do we collaborate with to make things real? It's these 4 questions that match how we thought about our own ways of working and the challenges that we experience. For example, we found that we may consider ourselves a bit too agile at times, making it hard to stay on course when priorities change regularly. Our teams had learned to over-index on polished, detailed solutions, which slowed down our feedback loops and prevented stakeholders and customers from providing feedback early. We also found it hard to set time boxes for ourselves and keep the momentum, make decisions quickly. That was actually highlighted as a major theme in a survey last year. And while our teams generally work really well as a cross-functional unit, involving other teams on time in projects is a challenge. And I'm sure some of our customer success managers are nodding in agreement right now. All this is to say, we are very intentional about our ways of working, and I'm proud that it's such a priority at Miro. So here's how we talk about ways of working. At the core is our product discovery and delivery lifecycle from discover to deliver. That helps us to have shared language and expectations across the entire company. But the 4 key competencies that we look for when we want to improve how we work are those 4. It's purpose, connecting the dots and ensure we prioritize for impact. Customer focus, where the teams understand the actual problem to solve and establish fast learning loops in their cadence. Velocity, so how teams are able to set pace and time boxes to drive work forward and keep the momentum. And collaboration, how we take time to form as teams, make work agreements, and continuously improve how we work. They act together to balance each other out, but they provide a useful framework for teams to ask themselves how they could improve. Now we're going to share 3 key practices that we are heavily invested in the last 6 to 12 months. Concepts that our teams in product design and engineering are already heavily using, and that our teams outside of that, like our people team, the marketing team, go-to-market teams, are starting to adopt as well. Before that, though, I want to acknowledge something that's incredibly important to me. Context matters. And changing ways of working is hard and it's messy. There's no silver bullet, a framework to rule them all. What works in a mid-sized innovative SaaS company may not work the same way in a large traditional financial institution. Best in class is not applying best practice, but best in class means having the ability to reinvent yourself, trying new practices and disregard old ones that don't serve you anymore. We don't do everything right at Miro, but what we do really well is trying out different things, and we're not afraid to launch fast and iterate, even when it's about internal ways of working. Our ambition is that by openly sharing our own approach to change and the practices that we use, we inspire you, the practitioners and leaders and decision makers, to engage in conversation about how to innovate better. In the coming months, we'll be sharing a lot more. But for now, we want to show you 3 key practices that we use internally. All right, let's get practical. Here's what Jen and I will be sharing. Number 1, bad version, to help us move from polished solutions to an ugly version that encourages feedback early. Kicking off every project together, helping us improve cross-functional collaboration early. And a date for a date. In an effort to drive work forward, teams set their own time boxes for the next decision point to be clear on expectations with stakeholders. Okay, let's talk about bad version. This is actually more of a cultural shift than anything else. So helping Mironeers feel comfortable sharing a bad version, something ugly or a sketch of something, but something visual to provide feedback early on to help iterate. This example that you see here may not look like a bad version, but I just really love it and couldn't resist putting it into the presentation. It's a screenshot from the presentation of our hackathon in April. The feature you now know as AI Companion started off as a hack. To show the potential power of the idea, the team built an AI agent trained on our data from founder Andre and the lyrics of Beyonce. It was simple enough to showcase, and it was clearly a crowd favorite. Then kickoff, and that's probably my favorite practice. At Miro, you will rarely find a project that is not being kicked off together. While often misunderstood as a heavy lift, we encourage teams to get together early without any solutions in mind and talk about the problems, the goals, and people involved. It's a collaborative session to determine priority. And we are fine with stopping at kickoff and agreeing that it's not a priority. But we do realize that if we don't kick off, teams run ahead with solutions and stakeholders are not involved early enough, causing all sorts of problems down the track. Jen, do you want to talk about date for a date?
I absolutely would. Thank you, Dom. So I actually asked Dom if I could talk a bit about a date for a date because I noticed its immediate impact on me as a member of go-to-market when I noticed another team in our product organization really adhering to this practice. A date for a date simply means that the date for our next milestone, whether that's a pre-release review or our solutions review or even our post-release review, is something that needs a date so that we can experience that forward momentum of always looking ahead towards the next milestone. The team sets the date, which is really critical. The team that is doing the work really up close to how the idea is being tested and progressed with customers during testing or in feedback with stakeholders are able to set those dates so that we can set expectations about forward progress. As a member of go-to-market, I really appreciated that the team actually did an extra step where they compiled everything in a really nice and concise Slack message in a channel called Product News. And so I kind of treat it like my newspaper. I go to Product News on a daily basis in the morning with my coffee, and I scan through the team's updates and look particularly for that next milestone date. What that does for me is that it sets expectations. When might that feature be ready for me to try so that I can build content to share with our users? And how does the team communicate expectations about progress? And if we can't make that date, how can we get an investigation going so that everyone can support learning about what maybe is causing that friction or what additional solutions might we want to try? And where do we need to go back to the drawing board versus what are we ready to prepare together to release to our customers? So I really love a date for a date. I think it's an excellent practice, and this little added element of including it in this really clean Slack channel makes it really easy for someone outside of the team to come get an update without having to, clutter up a meeting or, look too hard for that answer. And so Dom was also kind enough to let me talk about some of the results that we've received so far from the Ways of Working survey, where Dom and team were asking Mironeers about our changes and focuses on ways of working and how Mironeers felt about them and felt prepared for them. So the first were some really positive results. 70% of Mironeers were aware of our change with ways of working and the focus on this model and understand the intent and the approach. So really good stuff about a lot of people being aware of it. Many agreed too that having shared language about our ways of working was really important to help set expectations and apply the right mindset. And 65% believed that project kickoffs improved collaboration and helped set the team up for success, which, as you might know from just even using Miro, collaboration is something we value very deeply, that no one idea or one concept or item of work is done alone. Really needs the team to accomplish. Some areas of opportunity that we found in the survey was that many told us that parts of the process can feel heavy and too much like documentation. So there's room for improvement there. There's also room for improvement in spreading these practices and this knowledge outside of product teams who are maybe already doing it really successfully to teams like mine and go to market. So just like a product, change requires continuous improvement. And I love that our team is so dedicated to that. So you may have listened to this whole presentation, heard those awesome stats and concepts, these 3 practical ideas that we just shared. And you might be wondering, okay, I think my team could really improve our ways of working. I totally hear you that we need to maybe set up the right conditions for innovation. We could use some improvement in the way that we work together. What could I do to try some of these ideas out? Or what could I do to learn more about how my team is working on this? And one practical step that we would recommend is to do a benchmark exercise with your team. And Dom and team have actually put together a Miro Ways of Working team health check template, which you can access today in Miroverse. I'm going to show you exactly how to find access to it. This interactive workshop is designed for your team to do asynchronous work and then come together to share specific feedback about ways of working as aligned to these 4 areas of purpose, customer centricity, velocity, and collaboration, so that you can unearth that really good insight and feedback, select some priority items that you want to address, and then move forward from there. So I'll actually leave presentation mode here in Miro so that I can come over to a blank spot on the board and show you how to access this template and how you might use it with your team. So you'll just go to miro.com/Miroverse. I know that many of you have your favorite Miroverse templates, and you know just how many awesome ones you can find in our search bar. You're going to search for Miro Team Health Check. And the first one that you see from Dom is the one that you want to select. Now, with any template in Miroverse, you can get a bit of a preview by selecting the template, learn a little bit about it in its description, and what its purpose is. You'll also be able to kind of look around in the template in this little preview window so that you can see how the workshop will be designed. To use the template, simply select the board that you want to use or create a new one. Miro's going to take me back to the board that we were just presenting on and add the template on a blank spot on the board. And here we are. So let me briefly take you through it and then show you a few techniques that you might want to use in Miro to do this workshop with your team. So the template will give you instructions about the purpose of the Miro Ways of Working team health check, which is to do that work to unearth those insights and feedback from your team about how they're performing in terms of their ways of working against these items. And it will also give you instructions about how to run this like a workshop. So both running the session in an asynchronous way and then having discussion with your team on a call. You'll use a few of our newer features. And let me just go over here to the board itself and to some of these items on the canvas to show you how they'll operate. So what you can do right away is you can click on this button to make names anonymous so that as your team is dragging and dropping dots and adding sticky notes with detail on their particular perspective on these items, they can have the benefit of anonymity so that they can share more freely with their feedback. Our dot voting widget, which we launched just a couple of months ago, will allow the team to continuously drag dots of any color onto the spectrum so that they can vote how much do they agree with the statement with relationship to their team. You can also add, a little bit of extra detail in sticky notes, and the team can drag them right here for that extra context. So the team will get time to go through these 8 elements. So each of these right here. Now, once the team has gotten a chance to leave their feedback and to rate, their perspective on a spectrum, you'll then get an opportunity to schedule time with the team and then select 2 of these areas for priority. So it could be that the team really wants to focus on velocity. How do we make confident and fast decisions? Or maybe we want to talk about collaboration. How do we empower continuous improvement on the team? So you'll just select the 2 areas of priority and then host a brainstorming session so that the team could learn how they can improve. From there, you then create some concrete actions. So one more technique that I wanted to show you that you might like to use inside of Miro to make this work go a bit faster and maybe a bit more successful is that as the team is adding ideas about what we can improve, and let's say we'd like to improve our speed. And one thing that we'd like to improve is to have easier access to tools we need to do the job. Okay, so maybe that's one of them. Maybe another thing that we uncovered when we were looking at our processes more particularly and wondering about what's slowing us down is that we're kind of doing too much work in meetings. Maybe we could do more work outside of meetings and that it would benefit that cross-functional team that's spread all across the globe. So maybe we want to try more, maybe we're we do too much work in meetings. Maybe we can try to do something outside of that, right? Maybe another thing we could improve would be to, document lightweight habits that each team member could try on every project. Maybe 2 or 3 things that they want to change, make it really clear and easy for people to look at. Okay, so we've got these things that we could do to improve, something that we could try. So something that I'd encourage you to also try is to use Miro AI to help you generate some ideas. So maybe we can just select these 3 ideas, which will serve as context for Miro AI, and then ask it to generate action items based on these areas of improvement. We'll give it the prompt, ask it to generate some sticky notes. And then over here to the right, we've got some clear, helpful ideas to get the team started on some practical improvements that they might make. Now, of course, you're the human. We always have to edit and reflect on the output of something like Miro AI. But I think this is a really great way to overcome a cold start when you're trying to come up with action items from there. At the end of your workshop, your team will have the opportunity to give feedback on the team health check. And I think it's also probably a good practice to discuss with the team, when can we check back? Will we have improved any of those elements after we take some key actions? When should we check in again on our health check and our ways of working to see how we're performing? Okay, so now let's give you a really practical timeline of what you can do next. So set a date for your workshop, host the workshop with your team, and then select one action item that you want to progress on from this workshop. And then I'd like to invite you to a session that I'll be teaching a little later this month, where we'll be taking some of those common challenges and maybe key action items that teams may want to improve upon. And I'll be showing you how you might use Miro specifically as a tool to empower those changes and those actions. So I really hope that you join us. I think it'll be a lot of fun, and we'll keep the conversation going. As Dom said, we'll also find other opportunities to share more about our own ways that we're approaching our ways of working and overcoming challenges with creating the right conditions for innovation. And we'll invite you along the way to share in the research, the insights, the stories from ourselves, but also from you, our customers, and learning how we're all improving. Dom and I really enjoyed spending the time with you today to talk a bit more about how Miro innovates and our approach to ways of working. We very sincerely hope that you took away something insightful and maybe interesting to go discuss with your team and something practical to try. We hope that you enjoy the rest of your time here at Canvas 24. Do let us know in the chat if you've got any other questions or comments. Our moderators are standing by to support, and we'd love to keep the conversation going. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.